and good day to you, and welcome to another episode in the series of Impact, where we talk life and the influence of life on each other. Today, we have a very special guest with us. She's a freelance writer. She writes on a range of topics for Christian and family, and she is also a creative writer for retreats and Christian events. She loves family, and she loves to see children grow in their relationship with God. She is the family director Family Ministries director for the Trans-European Division of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Today we have Karen Holford with us. Hello, Karen, and welcome.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I just want to say, really have always heard about Karen Halford, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to learn a bit more about you. I've, used many of your resources and books with children, and, even in the last month or so, this year, at the start of this year, we had the 10 days of prayer, and the resources the Flourish resources were really amazing. So thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
Now, we talk about all this work that you have done, but for anybody who is just tuning in and listening in and wanted to know, who is Karen? What would you say? How would you describe Karen?
Well, Karen is all sorts of things. But I think the one thread through my life is being a beloved child of God. And that's my primary identity, is that, being a beloved daughter of God, and just wanting to experience more of that love. The older I grow, the more I realize just the impact of God's love in my life from birth onwards, and being aware of how I want to expand my picture of God's love every day, to see more ways he's loving me, and then share that love with others, open their eyes to the ways God is loving them. And that's really powerful and amazing stuff.
All right, so you say you have been doing that from all your life, and you have been growing up loving the Lord. So tell us about Karen the child. Where did you grow up? How was life? And when did you actually start loving God? What is it?
I can never remember not loving God. I can never remember not knowing that God loved me. And I think that's huge. I don't think I realized until just recently how powerful that is, to grow up in a home. So my parents, my grandparents were Adventist, and they wanted to convey to me that God was a loving God through the way they taught me about God, the way that we lived our family life. And I realize now just how powerful that is, to grow up from the start knowing God loves me completely. And I think it wasn't until things rocked my life. We lost a baby to miscarriage. We had some other tragedies. And in those moments, I never thought, God, where are you? You're not there. You're not answering my prayers. You're doing this to me. What have I done wrong? My first thought was, okay, God, I know you love me, and somehow we're going to get through this. And there has been such a strength in my life that I took for granted, really, because I didn't know any other way to be. Like, that's always what I'd kind of learned. And I just realized more and more recently how powerful that is, to have that solid core that I'm beloved by God, and nothing I can do will stop that, will change that. And everything that happens to me, God is with me and he'll help me. And I've seen that more and more in my life. He's helped me to become more and more courageous in stepping out in his love and seeing what will happen. So it's been an adventure. I was a very shy child, actually. I still am deeply at heart an introvert. And there's sometimes when I'll escape to a cupboard or something,
Yeah.
When I was a child, I used to hide in the cupboard at church so people didn't have to speak to me. And I was at a really loving church, most amazing church for the 1960s, that was actually extremely intergenerational and very, very loving and kind. It was such a positive experience. I grew up in Coventry Church in the 60s and 70s, and it was just a wonderful place to experience God amongst the people there, how they treated us as kids. We were involved in the church service from a young age, teaching our Sabbath school classes from a young age. they would distribute the days between us in the youth class,
Yeah.
and we'd each present one day for 5 minutes. And so we learned to teach, we learned to lead, we learned to, speak up in church, play music in church, and we were valued. And that's huge, I realize now.
I,
And then,
I'm just, listening to you, and I'm thinking how different things are now. Where, you were teaching at a young age, and the intergenerational thing that is, I think, missing. And you're saying because you were given that freedom, or that the opportunities that made you into who you are.
it really did. And I'm actually passionate about intergenerational worship. I think I just took it for granted there, and I rediscovered it early in my children's ministries at the South England Conference, and got very excited about it. And then I've written a book called Altogether Wonderful for the World Church to help them train people in intergenerational worship. And so I'm trying to encourage that. I think when children come to church and experience God in worship services that are multisensory, designed for all ages, but something they can understand and participate in, then I think it's exciting for them to experience church as a multisensory learning experience, which is what they experience at school a lot. So,
Yes.
we don't sit down in rows like we did in the Victorian time, but it's very much hands-on. And I actually believe that God designed us to be very hands-on and made use of that when he designed things like the tabernacle, the worship services, what was in there, incense, flavors, smells, sounds, sights, everything was to teach us through all of our senses. So I think somehow we've lost a bit of that.
Yeah.
And we need to think about regaining it.
I think you're so right. I was at the church this weekend, and it was for the Adventist Day, and the president of the mission said it's the first he's seen the church so full, and because it was adventurers, we're focusing on being interactive, object lessons and hands-on arts and craft for the entire day, and the adults were the ones who was like, wow, they were really engaged, and I think
Yeah.
what we are missing in realizing that aim for the children, we hit everyone, but if we aim for the adults, we miss children.
Yeah, that's so important. And we need to remember that everything we do for children in church is evangelistic. That's
Yes.
making up their mind. And so we can see that what we do for them is missional, because we want, of anything, we want to save our own kids, and
Yes.
they're the easiest to reach. So the better we can make our services that engage them, and the more wonderful their Sabbath experiences are, I think those things can be really helpful in helping them to make positive choices, because they see that what we have is something vibrant, enjoyable, engaging for them, and they find purpose in that. They can join in and have a role like I did.
And recently, my daughter, well, just yesterday, my daughter said, she's only 12, and she said she's thinking of teaching the kindergarten classes. And I'm thinking, wow, how often do children think of that, and what,
Yeah.
are the opportunities given for churches, in
Yeah.
churches for children that age?
And that's amazing. And I hope that your church can nourish that interest that she has. It's so important when children have an interest in anything, that the people around them say, yes, let's run with that. Let's do that. And make the most of it, because the Holy Spirit is leading our kids too. And
Yes.
we can, when we follow them, sometimes we discover the Holy Spirit in their direction, which is incredible.
You mentioned about growing up, all your life being an Adventist. How was family? How did the family make sure that your upbringing was, and your church life was something that you won't leave and say it was boring? What was it that the family did that helped? And so probably the others can listen and say, probably we should try that.
I think I have to say my family wasn't that like good at doing regular family worship. And one thing that I'm helping families realize now is that family worship is great. It's great to spend time together worshiping God and learning about him. And we did our lesson and things like that. I think that they lived out their faith in a vibrant way. They loved us to bits. They taught us in the way they related to us. They were so forgiving. I remember doing something wrong and expecting my dad to like really punish me. And no, he didn't. He just said, no, I'm not going to hit you. I love you. And just gather me on his lap and let's put this right now. You broke this, and let's fix it together. And that was just so powerful. I have that wonderful memory of that loving discipline. And to be honest, actually, my first memories are quite different too, because my very first memories pretty much were my parents were working at a mission hospital in Ghana.
Right.
And so at 3, I was living there with them and my baby brother. And so my first real memories are living in Ghana, in this vibrant, colorful place, in this mission hospital, with my parents working with purpose and compassion for the people there, and experiencing different culture, different life, so much color. That when I came back to England, my memories have no color till I'm about 7. Because Ghana was so colorful.
Yeah.
This dreary, damn England, so that was also really influential, that the idea that we're here to serve others. And I saw my parents serving joyfully in so many ways, finding ways to be kind to people, relieve suffering, be compassionate. And they lived out their faith in such a real, honest and open way with us. And I just wanted to be like them. I mean, they were just so loving and kind to others. And I think what they may not have taught me in specific, family worship, they lived out in their lives, in their character, in the ups and downs of their life. And like any parents, none of us are perfect, but they gave me glimpses into God's love powerfully. And that's amazing. That stayed with me.
I think that's one of the aim of these conversations that I have is about not the things that are taught by the book and in words, but sometimes it's just the actions of your parents that you see things and it means something to you, and you get a better lesson from what they say because they're living it out. And how do we make sure that we help others do this?
How do you help them? I think just helping them open their eyes to see the possibilities, how to live their life with faith in front of their kids. And I don't think we've been so good at teaching that. And now when I'm trying to teach about family spirituality, I talk about this. Open windows into your relationship with God, with your kids. Pray aloud with them in ways that they can understand. Obviously, use language they can understand and access, because prayer needs to be like talking to God, like a friend. Just to talk about how you manage your ups and downs, how you listen for God. And one thing that I found really significant is helping parents to nurture their children's character. And when I was a parent, I didn't really know how to do that. Like, people would say, oh, it's an important work of parents to nurture their kids' character. And I go, yeah. But it sounded kind of heavy and boring. And then I was asked to help create a whole day-long workshop on developing children's character, actually for the NHS in Scotland. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. The NHS in Scotland, who's trying to help children's mental health, is wanting me to present a day on character. And they gave me this amazing book, and it was actually written by a Christian, and I learned so much from her. And the basic thing is knowing what the main character strengths are, and then spotting your child doing it and saying, wow, you made a good choice. That was so kind. Or that was so brave, or that was real self-control. Well, you were a great leader when you did that. Or that was such a wise choice. And when we tell them this, we kind of help them define themselves, who they are. Wow. Mom said when I did that, I was kind. And now what do I do here? I wonder what kind does. And it changes the way they see themselves and the way that they make their choices. And this is powerful in my life, because when I was about 6 or 7, I made a bird at school. It was in those days, there'd be a big box of junk in the corner, like glitter and all kinds of random stuff and feathers. And we had to make a bird. I was about 6 or 7, and I made this bird. And I remember thinking, birds flap their wings. And I'm going to see if I can make this bird flap its wings. So I kind of did something with, I don't know, string and stuff. And it was probably a really, not that brilliant a bird, but someone said to me, Karen, that's so creative. And I thought, it's a nice word, creative. Didn't really know what it meant. So I said, what does creative mean? And they said, well, it's like you want to do something different to everybody else. You want to make something look good, or try a new idea. And I mean, it's hard to kind of explain creative, isn't it, really? And I thought, you know what? I like this. I like creative. I want to be creative. So the next time we had to make something at school, we had to make a card for our mothers for Mother's Day, and we were just sticking like flat flowers on it.
Right.
And I thought, I want to make these pop up. I want to make these three-dimensional. So I worked really hard that my card would sort of pop up with flowers. And now, you know, I've written about 6 books on creativity, particularly creativity in worship. And I don't know that I'd ever would have known I was creative if someone hadn't said,
Instead it,
maybe
yeah.
I discovered it accidentally. But the fact that someone named that for me, and I thought, wow, I like that. And I worked on it myself, you know, because I was excited about that. And then I started to write when I was about 6 or 7 too. So I thought, oh, every time I write, I'll try and be a bit more
Creative.
creative. Yeah. And so it was that, just that word and someone encouraging it shaped my writing, shaped my creativity and worship and things like that. And I'm so grateful that someone named it, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, that's, you know, again, an example of how just by the word someone says to us that it can spur us on. And I was going to ask you, you know, apart from, you know, your parents, and their influence in how they live their life, who else in around at that early age was influential to you? I made a mark on you.
Um, I had a teacher who really encouraged my writing when I was 9 and 10. And I'd always loved to write. And her specialty was creative writing. So she really nurtured that in me and helped me to focus on my writing, to explore writing. And I am so glad she did that. My mother encouraged my writing as well. Um, and also, strangely enough, it was the local paper. The
Mm.
local paper, the Coventry Evening Telegraph, had this children's page, and I know now they print anything any child writes, you know. But so what? I would write things about church. I would write about what we did. I'd write about our camps. I even wrote a Bible story about Mary and Martha in Bethany. And they published all of this. You know, they didn't care that it was about church or that it was about the Bible. They did it. They published it. And when I saw like the words in print and my name there, I got very excited about it. So that was another one of those things, a bit like saying I'm creative, you know, just putting my stuff in the paper.
Yeah.
It inspired me. I want to be a writer. Some point in my life, I want to write one book, you know, that would be nice. And I wrote like short stories and some articles and things, and as I grew up. And so I always knew actually that probably from the age of 9 or 10 that God wanted me to be a writer and do something with writing. And I never knew quite how. And I was going to go to university and read English so I'd be a better writer. And then I decided, you know, I can't really support myself being a writer. That's not going to go too well. And so I did something else. But yet God has honored my desire to be a writer and made it happen, even though I didn't go and study, you know. So it's really been an important part of my life. I love writing for God.
I mean, you know, as you talk about your writing for, you know, just sharing your writing in any space you can. I'm just thinking, you know, these opportunities are not given to children nowadays. What are the opportunities for them to write freely and, you know, a space to publish? And it's something probably, you know, we need to think about more to give
Yeah.
children that opportunity.
I think we do need to nurture it. I sponsored a competition for children at Stanborough Park School for a while to write and gave prizes. And I said, I don't mind if your grammar's not great or your spelling is off. What I want to see is the creativity in your writing. That's what counts. You can figure the rest of it out. The computer will even fix that for you.
Mhm.
But you need to make the stories. You need to have the creativity. And so, yeah, I would encourage children to write. We need more people who can write well. And it's amazing. I think for me, sometimes an editor will say, oh, Karen, someone let us down and I need to have an article on this by the end of next week. And I'll think, I've never had a thought in my head about that topic. I really have no idea. And then, you know, I pray and say, God, help me. I've got to write this article by the end of next week and I have no idea. I'm like a blank slate. and ideas will come that I could never have imagined. And I know that's not me.
Yeah.
And that's such an amazing experience when it's humbling to think, wow, yeah, the ideas just come from the Holy Spirit when you get stuck.
I mean, I guess he leads you. If he give you the challenge or the task, he will prepare you and
Yeah.
give you what is needed. You talk about, learning from your parents. What do you say, or which one of your parents do you think you are most like?
I think I'm definitely like my mother. She would take me around and she'd do kind things to people, and I'd just be in tow behind her, and I would see how delighted they were and just think, oh, I want to make people happy like that. And she was also very creative. She's still creative. She's 87 now.
Mm.
She's still very creative. She's still amazingly kind, and she nurtured my creativity, my writing, and my character. And my dad was great. I mean, he taught me other things like how to sail and how to be brave and some other great things too. But I'm more like my mom,
Mm.
definitely, people would
And,
say.
and do you see yourself as a parent, parenting just like they did, or did have you changed anything?
I think I changed something because I did educational and developmental psychology masters at Andrews University, and I think they did a fantastic job. But I think every generation, particularly now, we learn more about parenting and how to nurture kids, nurture their creativity, their character. And there's more available to us to learn from. And it's great because I see that now my daughter is continuing to learn, and she parents her kids better than I parented her. And that's the way it should be, that every generation is learning, taking what was good from the one before, adding on current learning, and doing an even better job. And that for me is really inspiring to see how well she is parenting. And I learned from her. And now when I teach some of my parenting classes, I'll say, I see my daughter doing this, and I wish I'd known that when they were young. So yeah,
So you're saying it's about not thinking that, our time was the best or was it, because as you grow, things change, technology. How do you find parenting or dealing with parenting in a technological age now? How different is it, and what are the challenges you see parents are facing?
I think it's hugely different. I think it's because of the sort of addiction to screens, and children want to be on there so much, and there's so many things they can do, and it's very engaging. And yes, I find that a concern. I think it's good that they know how to do these things. They need to be able to operate technology and understand things, because that's how their world is. It's really vital. But also, how do we help them play in the real world, experience wonder and nature? As a kid, I used to run around the fields and pick flowers and, look at nature. And I think it's good to be intentional about taking children to experience all kinds of nature and slow down and be filled with wonder for it. I think it's very soothing. It helps them be less anxious. And the research from Harvard Business College says that it actually helps us to be more empathic and more humble and more inspired when we spend time in wonder and nature. So it's really good for us. So I think those sorts of things, I think engaging them in activities of purpose, like how can they be part of cleaning up the environment or helping people who are struggling, and really feel that they can make a positive difference in the world, in real life with real people and real environments. I think that's important. And helping them have some other skills. It's great that they learn about technology, but I think it's great to think about what skills is my kid gonna need when they leave home.
Yeah.
To cook, to like clean, wash, fix things, manage their money. There are so many things, and to kind of make a list of them and then think, how can we teach this in a fun way? How can we make this creative and interesting? Do it together as well. I think quite often we tell kids to go and tidy their room on their own, and they have no idea where to start.
Yeah.
You need to get in there and model it. And I actually tell parents, clean your house joyfully. If you grumble about it and then you say to the kids, hey, can you do this? What they're going to say, like, when we're enthusiastic and say, I love doing this, it makes me feel good, it's fun, then they're actually thinking, oh, okay, You know, it's more positive for them. So I think we need to be aware how our attitudes can rub off on them and shape them. And so yeah, more interaction in the real
I,
world.
I like that, clean your house more joyfully, because yeah, we do that, say go and clean the room, but we are expecting them. But if we do it, if we make work fun,
Mm.
then it's not going to be seen as work anymore. I think that's one of the things, and before today, I've always seen you as, Karen, who writes, and very, but the one word that sticks out to me, when I now see you, is that word creative. And I can see why, a lot of your books have that title in it, creative. How do we get more creativity in the sermons, in the churches, in children's ministry, in family life? How do we get more of that?
I think it's just having some opportunities. I think it started for me by reading a book about creative worship. And I suddenly thought, wow, worship can be creative. There's a new thought. I think I had kind of had that thought, but hadn't really named it. And so I started reading just some books. And once I started reading, that it opened up so many more possibilities. So I think reading some books, even going along to see some creative worship services somewhere else, can help. My book, Altogether Wonderful, actually is a whole handbook on how to make church services more creative for all ages. So it kind of as a good how to. I think take a Bible story. Often the parables are quite good to start with because they're stories and you can play with them more.
Yeah,
Then think, how can we experience this with the children in multisensory ways? And quite often I will take a story, say, for example, the lost sheep, and do a story about the lost sheep, and then think, how can the sheep shape how we learn the scripture together? How will it shape how we do the offering? How will it shape how we do the benediction even? And so we have fun ways. So the offering is collected in envelopes with sheep on the front, and the children bring them up and put them into like a pasture of green grass. And they
yeah,
gather. We hid all the words to the scripture reading. We wrote them on sheep and hid them around the church, and the children had to go and find them and get them in the right order. So they were involved, but everything was sheep themed. And at the end, we gathered all the children in the middle of the church and we held hands around them as adults and we blessed them. And prayed that none of the sheep would be lost. So we kind of made a pen around them and made sure that we were encompassing them with God's love. So it was taking the story and then using the story to actually inspire us. How do we use this theme and apply it to the different aspects of the service and engage children in it? And then afterwards, we did a lot of different crafts and activities with looking for things and lost sheep and making sheep. There's a really nice approach to perhaps not so much the service, but like Bible study, Sabbath school. And it's something I've learned when I studied something called godly play, where you tell children a Bible story and you use, maybe a sand tray and wooden people, kind of
right.
in a traditional kind of way, but you make it three-dimensional for them.
Yes,
And then you ask some questions, which is so beautiful. They're like, what did you like best about the story? What was the most important message for you? Where are you in the story? What part of the story is most about you? And what did you learn about God's love from the story? And they're really good questions because you can apply them to any story.
right.
And there's no right or wrong answers, but it nurtures some spiritual reflection in the children. So they're not just saying, well, there were this many people on the ark and the animals came in 2 by 2 and 7 by 7 and the facts. They're actually wondering about God. And then when it's a craft time, you say, how do you want to respond to the story? And you lay out whatever craft materials you have neatly, and they go and choose what they make. You don't have to cut all the bits out
Yeah,
and give them something pre-made. When they have to think, how am I responding to this? How do I respond that God, loves me and would come and find me in the wilderness in the night if I got lost? And what does it mean to be a sheep? And then they make something. That process is much more reflective, more spiritually
yes,
nurturing. So I like to use that and tell people, if you really don't have a clue what to do and someone dumps you teaching kids at the last minute, or you're not even quite sure what to do for family worship, just tell a story, ask these questions, lay out the crafts and let them make whatever. But what they make is between them and God. It's not
yes,
a critique. It's not the end product, it's the process of thinking. And it's really good to do even as an adult, these things. So I've experienced some of these making things in reflection, or drawing something or writing something, and it's really taken the lesson deeper for me as well.
And I mean, I see that one of the things I do when I do presentation with children is I do a lot of object lessons and using science to teach Bible stories. But then you have, on very many occasions, you have members in the church who say, "Oh, you're bringing back magic into the church," and it's just, how do we, talking about intergenerational worship, how do we get others to see that we need to change as times change?
What I do when I teach about intergenerational worship, I talk about how worship changed through the whole Bible, from Garden of Eden, that was outside, it was multi-sensory. Move on a bit, you'll have Abraham wandering around making, altars. And then you have the children of Israel and the tabernacle service, that's totally different again. Then they built their own temples and synagogues and things. You have house church, they were taught, teach your children these things as you live your life, as you go about your way, as you lie down and get up and eat. And so that's in your life. And then you have Jesus coming, sitting on mountainsides and anywhere, just telling stories, using visuals that were around them as well. And then you have house church. And say all through the Bible, the worship changed to accommodate the context. The challenge with today is that, we've had perhaps Catholic services going way back, and they created a kind of service with hymns and readings and words, and then that got adopted by the Protestant church, and then the Puritans kind of stripped that of anything that was considered fancy, and then we've inherited this. And 200 years later or 300 years later, we're not adapting to what's now.
Yes.
I also tell them that people who designed these fancy church services were often monks and priests who had no kids, and they had words. They were theologians, so everything is words. The prayer, the scripture reading, the hymns, the liturgy, the sermonette, whatever, even the announcements, and it's all words. And most of us are not all words. Most of us have to learn in other ways. And God did that in the tabernacle. Jesus did that when he taught. And how can we actually be more like those cultures than something we've kind of gone off in a diversion from all of that and become something quite other? And I point out that in most church services, it's sort of 90% verbal, and probably the only thing that's interactive is when you put money in the offering, and you can do that. So I just kind of get them to think about what it's like. And then I say, church for kids is like an adult sitting on a table because back's not supported, your legs are dangling, in front of a blank wall because there's nothing to see. Then someone plays you a sermon in Chinese for an hour.
You're right. You're right. I've listened to Rachel Turner, who puts it well. Who talks about a child, when you have a child sitting and they can't see the preacher, the back of the hats and everything. There's nothing for them to gain. And I remember when I took over children's ministry at my church, one of the first thing I did was to get children to draw the picture of the sermons, and the preachers who preach for the children, they were able to get the picture, but the children who drew any and everything, that they didn't get anything from that. And I'm just wondering, is there something to do with the training that we have for pastors who are not adapting to lessons or sermons that can fit for children?
I think so. I think there's a bit of a gap there, and I'm not exactly sure what they're teaching them now. But I'm not sure that they get an awful lot of teaching in children's ministries. And thinking about how do you speak to everybody in your church, and how do you preach and create a worship service that engages the interest of children? It's a special skill, and some people just get it and they run with it and they do amazing things. So I think we need to do more teaching of pastors in that area. And occasionally I run training sessions for pastors and churches. And I had all of my training videos that I did during the pandemic with a couple of other people are all on the website that I have. It's a bit tricky to find them, but they are there. So I think you need to go on a sort of training course that I create where you learn the history of worship, where you think about different ways to do it, think about the impact of what we do now on the children.
Yeah.
And I tell them every worship service is an evangelistic opportunity. Are you bringing them nearer to Jesus, or are you pushing them further away? And that's what we need to keep asking ourselves.
And one other thing I say is that if we have church geared towards the children can't come without the adults, and then that's the opportunity to minister to the adults as well as the children. And I've seen that we have done VBS Holiday Bible Club, and you have children and parents are saying the children come home singing the songs and they're telling them about the stories, and the parents are coming. I've been to churches where because of the VBS, the graduation, they're saying is the first they're seeing these community members in the church. So there's opportunities for, I don't think we have children's pastors, do we? Probably, but to think about that in churches.
Yeah, I think we need to think more about that. I think there is a blessing for those churches that don't have the same system as ours, where they can have a children's pastor,
Yeah.
or even a family ministry pastor that keeps those things in mind. I know when we were in Scotland, even quite small churches from other denominations would have full-time children and family workers that would do toddler groups and children's groups and work them into the worship service and things like this, and parenting groups. And I think we're missing something by not having these specialists and training them to work with children in our churches. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, and probably we can think about the children's ministries leaders to give them some even better training so that they can, take on that mantle that is missing.
Yes.
You have written, quite a number of books and on creativity and family worship and all those. Tell us about which one is your first book you wrote?
First book I wrote was called The Loneliest Grief, and it was really about our experience of miscarriage, because when it happened to us, we didn't really know anyone else who'd had a miscarriage. And when I tried to find books, they had a different perspective on death than I believed. And so I decided to write a book. I actually wanted to write another book because by the time I wrote that, I had a couple of children. So my next book was about motherhood and what it taught me about God's love, which has gone through a couple of titles, but it's now called Muddy Fingers, Sticky Feet or something.
Yeah.
And I wanted to write that, but I felt God saying, no, you must write the miscarriage book first. And even just last week, someone came to me and said, this book that's now from the early 1990s, said, I just shared that with someone this week and it was such a great help to them. And it's really nice to hear those, that it's still useful for people. So that was my first one. And then I wrote about, what being a mother had taught me about God's love. And then God took me in the direction of writing the creative prayer books, creative worship. And that was also an amazing experience. I just did a room full of creative prayers at an event, and someone came to me and said, you should write a book about these. Can you do 100? And then that started the whole series of 100 creative activities for Sabbath and worship and learning memory verses, prayer, etc. And they were great fun to do.
It's good to know that out of a tragic situation, a difficult situation, it can have an impact on lives even to this day. And it's about how do we make sure when we go through our trials or difficult times, we don't see it as the end, but probably the Lord working through.
Yes, really. I mean, it really helped me. I thought I'd come to terms with it and processed it, but as I wrote the book, I realized new things about it, and I saw God's love in the situation in ways I'd never noticed before, and that was really encouraging to me.
In terms of, you have been writing for a very long time now. How do you see the rise in AI and technology and the impact on how you write? Does it make a difference as to how you write? How do you adjust to that?
It doesn't really make a difference to how I write. I still write in the same way. I think the convenient thing is it's so easy to look up a reference or an idea or a quote or something like that, or check some research and things like that. That for me is easier. But I've always written in the same kind of way of, just getting down there. And mostly what I write, I like to write in one sitting. If it's a book, then I plan it well ahead and I try to do it within 3 weeks. Because if you go beyond 3 weeks, and other people have told me this who are writers, if you go beyond 3 weeks, you lose your place. You forget what you've already done, and you have to keep reading it again to make sure that you catch up with where you are and you don't lose your thread or you don't repeat yourself. So I make a very good plan for everything, every chapter, and then try to write in a 3 week span if I'm writing a longer book. It's not always possible, but it's the ideal for me. And if I write an article or something, I like to write it in one sitting if I can, or in one day. Sometimes it lingers, but it's always better when it is written in a close period of time. And then I go back and reflect on it and edit it, tweak it, refine it. But that's how I write, but everyone writes in a different way.
It's good to hear that there's a 3 week period that you work in, because I know I've started writing some things and I've done it and I've gone back and left it because there are other things. How do you shut out distraction, or from how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't written a book since I work at the division because I'm
Okay.
traveling there and everywhere, and it's a bit tricky. I would like to do something this summer if I can. So I would just make a very, very clear plan for everything. I know, what I'm going to write, very clear outline, very thorough outline, and then clear as much as I can and just get my head down. My husband's great because he'll do the cooking and pick things up. And I write a lot in the car if we're traveling. I just take my laptop in. I can't read in the car, but I can write.
Oh, wow.
And I've just learned it. And I think it's a gift from God that I can, write while we're going on a long journey and get quite a lot done that way. But that's a bit weird. I don't drive and write at the same time. That's not so good, but
Not a safe thing to do. No, definitely.
don't do that.
No, we're almost coming to an end, but I just wanted to know about, the work you're doing across the division, and tell us some of the impact that you're having and seeing happening in terms of family ministries and children's ministry across the division.
I see a big impact. When you start, it's hard to know what difference you're making, but because I've been there over 8 years now, and I go back to the same places and I'm seeing the same people, and I'm seeing the effect of what I've taught, and seeing people who are doing intergenerational worship, who are rethinking how they do children's ministries. I'm training people to become family ministries leaders. I have a 3-year training program, so they come for 5 or 6 days a year, and we go through some topics really thoroughly and teach about creative spirituality, a different aspect of that every time. And I see them go back into their own countries and do amazing things, and that's so inspiring. I work in women's ministries as well, and I think recently I'm seeing more and more that when I go somewhere, my goal is to expand their picture of God's love, whether I'm family ministries, children's ministries, women's ministries. How can you have a bigger picture of how loving God is, how much he is loving you, and how will that change you? Because a couple of years ago, when it was New Year, I thought, God, what's the most important thing? And I had this very clear idea that I should ask that my picture of his love would be expanded. And I read in a book by Ellen White that this is what will happen for eternity. Our picture of God's love, there's no end to understanding and learning it. So I thought, well, let's start here. And as I've asked God to expand my picture of his love, it really has transformed my ministry, my life. And I see people who catch that vision and who get inspired by that, and who see a different picture of God's love that transforms them, and then they share God's love with others. And for me, that's at the heart of everything. Jesus said, loving God and loving others is the most important thing. And I really see how that the more I love God and understand his love for me, the easier it is for me to love others and inspire them to experience God's love for themselves. Because ultimately, that's what changes our hearts and our lives.
Yeah.
And I see that ripple out slowly, gently. I see people growing in their picture of God's love and how it's shaping their ministry. And that's really heartwarming to me. I enjoy that.
I'm very, passionate about children and children ministry. And if I was to ask for, the places or, where those sort of children are being given the opportunities, where would you say those are happening the best or most?
I would, it's happening in little places all over the place, but I see some really amazing things happening in the Nordic countries. They've got together between the different countries like Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, and they work together on things that will nurture children's spirituality. They work on projects. And they're so intentional and proactive and creative about that. And I see it in their teaching. They're doing more intergenerational worship. They're making children's ministries more central to how the church works, doing amazing camps and great creativity. They're producing lots of good resources. So, and they're all small countries, but this idea of them coming together with this intentionality that we want to help children's ministries be more creative, more engaging. And there really are amazing people there doing really cool stuff. So it's
That's
exciting.
a place to connect with and see some good examples of ministry for children happening.
Yes. And then we have some new lessons coming out next year called Alive in Jesus, and they're amazing. Yeah, so we're looking forward to sharing beautiful stories and picture books with children about God.
Because it's about time we have a change, because it has been long in coming,
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to seeing those roll out, because we need to be updated, especially with the fact that children attention span and attention to details are so short. We need to work on that. You do a lot of speaking about children and health and spirituality. So tell us some more about that sort of work that you do with children.
Um, I'm very interested in children's mental health and everyone's mental health. And I created a project called Flourish, which is designed to help children and families and adults, anybody really, because there's lots of different ideas, to experience positive emotions, which I think are like the emotions that we were meant to experience, in Eden, in heaven, joy, hope, love, wonder, thanksgiving, these sorts of things. And that's what we were meant to experience. And in this world, we have to experience negative emotions, the ones that drain us, because this is the reality of the world.
Yeah.
We need to grieve, we need to be afraid to keep ourselves safe. And sometimes it's good to be angry and fight for injustice and things. But they can really drain us if we experience too much. So helping children and families to intentionally experience positive emotions, laugh together, wonder together, have fun together, be kind together. And I guess it's again, that's that real life engagement in positive experiences to help them to make choices that will, we know that when they do those things, their bodies and minds will feel better from those activities, because when we're grateful, our minds can't be grateful and anxious
Yes.
at the same time. And these sorts of just simple taking care of your mental well-being activities. And they're not complex at all, but helping people to be more aware of them, to experience them for themselves and say, oh yeah, I could do that. So that's something that I'm very interested about, as well as character development, because when children's characters are developed, they also are happier, more resilient. So those are important. And also helping parents to know how to discipline with love,
Yes.
um, and not fear, and helping them to discipline children in positive ways that nurture relationships and help them to make wise choices. That's also very important to me.
So you are doing a lot of work in terms of helping families, helping children, helping women, just because you want to see you, and you have experienced it yourself. You're seeing it in your own family, and you're seeing it around the world when you travel. You want to see children. It starts with the children, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Starts with children. Now you have all these books. Tell us where we can, anybody listening want to have any of your books, where they can get your books.
They're in different places. Obviously, they're on the internet and large booksellers. Also, the life, what do they call it? Life source.
Life source. Yeah, life source.
Adventist book centers. Just really Google my name, Karen Holford, Holford, and look and creativity, and you'll hit some of the books. But I've also written books for children, some books on relationships, and 52 Ways to Parent Happy Children was another of the books.
So you have the family book, the 100 creative prayer ideas for kids, 100 quick and easy worship ideas for kids, 100 creative activities for Sabbath, and Miss Grandpa. What is that one about? I'm not seeing.
I'm Miss Grandpa is really a book for children about how to deal with grief and loss in the family. And so at the back of it, there's also some practical ways to help children through grief, but also sharing the Adventist perspective on death, because many of the books are not in line with what we believe. And so it looks at like a little boy experiences the death of his grandfather, but also is experiencing, chrysalis and a caterpillar and a butterfly, and he's taking care of these things. And so he learns that when we're on Earth, it's kind of like the caterpillar, and when we die, it's a bit like the chrysalis. There's nothing happening there, it seems.
Okay.
And then when we're resurrected, we're like the butterflies, and it's so different between a caterpillar and a butterfly. And yet, so it's kind of this process that we go through. So yeah.
So if they want to get in, anyone wants to get in contact with you, do you have a website that they can connect with you?
I have the Trans-European Division website, and there are pages there. And most of my stuff, although I'm now Children and Women, is actually based on the Family Ministries website. And a lot of the children's stuff is based under spirituality, where you'll find intergenerational worship. We've made some colorful placemats that you can have on the table with ideas for worship around the dinner table. And you can just download them freely and print them off. So a lot of the things are on the Family Ministry website at the Trans-European Division. So go to Trans-European Division and then departments and family, and you kind of have to follow a couple of links. It's not straightforward. I also do lots of video webinars and video them, and there's links to those under the leadership as well on all sorts of topics. So you can find more there. Unfortunately, the link to email me on the website, the emails take about 3 months to get through, and we're not quite sure why. So it's best to find out what my email really is, and then
okay.
tell me. So.
And do you want to give that here, or?
Yes, I mean it's K Holford, HOLFORD @TED.adventist.org.
And so you can email Karen, and you will be able to get in touch with her if you want her to share with you, if your congregation, on any of these topics. Before you go, Karen, I just want to, we talk about a lot about work and your ministry and everything. What do you do for downtime?
I love to walk in nature. I really enjoy walking. And my husband and I actually walked all the way across the north of England a couple of years ago, from the Lake District right across to Robin Hood's Bay, just about 200 miles. We backpacked, which was amazing, on the Wainwright Way. And it was so lovely to be immersed in nature. I love to write. So although, it feels like my job, it's my joy that really inspires me. And I like to be creative. So to make things, to embroider, to sew, to make clothes. So creativity is my joy as well.
Do you do creativity in terms of art, pictures?
A bit, but it's more about process than end results. So I join up with a little art group of family therapists, because I'm a family therapist, and we get together and we do things together, sort of kind of an art therapy session. And I enjoy that. It's nice to chill and just create something together. I'm never going to be a famous artist, that's for sure. But I enjoy playing with the colors.
Who knows, maybe long after your work will become famous. You say you do family therapy. Do you still do that as a practice?
I do. I don't take on clients as such. So when I'm going to places, just because I can't in the complexity of my work and my travel. But when I'm somewhere and someone needs some help, I will say, I'll give you one session. We'll talk about things. Give me one help. We'll work towards that. And then I signpost them to resources that they might need so that I can give them something, because I can't really engage in long-term therapy with people. And I supervise Adventist counselors and therapists, so I'm a supervisor. So I really love that work, and it's really shaped how I see people, and to find the good in every person, and to help them find their hopes, and to see them humbly, look up at what they're doing and what they're struggling with in life, and thinking, wow, it's amazing what they're managing, and looking up at that in awe rather than looking down at someone and say, oh, you're really struggling. It's just to see what they're doing well, help them to notice that. And I often tell parents, whoever they are, when you go to bed at night, when you put your children to bed, tell them 3 things you saw them do well today. And when you go to bed, think about 3 things you did well today, and thank God for those things, because we do things well, most of us, 95% of the time, and the other 5% is just because we're human. And so to go to bed thinking, I did that well and God helped me, and tell your child, you did that well, I'm proud of you. Just sleeping with those thoughts in our mind can be healthier for us than worrying about all the things that didn't go quite right.
I think that's a good thing to do and to remember to do, because sometimes we forget to do those little things. But as we started out at the beginning talking about things that was said, how they can have a great impact on you. I just want to thank you for joining us. But before you go, the last thing I'll ask you, what is next for Karen? And where would we see Karen in 5, 10 years?
What's next for me? I don't know. I never thought I'd be here. God is amazingly full of surprises. And the fact that he would take what I thought was almost the shyest person in the world and give them a job at the Trans-European Division in a different country every weekend is like, that takes a sense of humor. So I love these verses in the Eugene Peterson's Bible, in Romans 8, that says, it's like a little child putting their hand in the hand of God and going, what's next, Papa? Excitedly. And I really have gone from probably a place of sort of fear about the future and what was going to happen and being quite uncertain, to just saying, God, I'm just here and it's great just working with you. I put my hand in yours, and wherever we go, we're going together. And he's taken me to so many places I could never imagine. I would like to write some more books. That would be fun. And that's certainly on my cards. And eventually when I retire, to spend more time with my grandchildren would be nice too. But we make the most of the time that we have, and do a lot more walking.
I'm sure you'll do, because that's in the nature, so you can't get rid of that. I'm sure we'll hear great things from you, and I just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing, all the resources that you're providing for family, for children, and we know that you have children and family at heart, and we'll definitely see impact on what you do. So we just want to thank you. Any last word before you go?
I would just say, whoever you live with, love them really well. Do something kind every day for those that you're with. Take care of those relationships, because they are so precious, and we often don't realize how precious they are until they're not there. But every relationship is precious, and focus on God's love for you, and then how you can pour that into the lives of those around you. Because ultimately, that's what makes a lasting difference. So.
Well said, Karen, and I just want to thank you again for taking the time to share with us and give us a greater insight. And from now on, the one word that I will associate with you is creativity. And I now understand more about your writing and creativity. So thank you for being with us.
It's been a pleasure. It's really great talking to you, Craig.
Thank you. So there we have it, another episode in the series. Remember to subscribe to our channels where you'll get notification of every episode that is sent out. But until next time, this is Impact, influencing lives by your living. Thank you for joining us. Bye.